Hello, welcome to Mystery in Middle Grade. Today I'm going to be sharing with you the titles that I finished in April. And I have such a large pile that I realized this video is going to be extremely long if I included all of them. So I've divided them into two. My first video, which is today's, will be featuring all the titles I've read for adults, including mysteries and some titles that were not mysteries. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and then a follow-up video will come soon that will feature all the middle grade titles that I read this month. So with that said, let's turn the page and get started. My first mystery of the month of April was This Story Might Save Your Life by Tiffany Crum. Now this one has been fairly popular, I believe. It is the story of a podcaster named Joy who does a very, very popular podcast with her best friend Benny. And one day she doesn't show up to tape the show, and Benny goes to her house and discovers that she and her husband have both gone missing. So he sets out, as you would expect, to find out what happened to her. Now this does have some podcast scripts in it, and so it's especially fun to listen to on audio, which is the way I read this book, and I would recommend that for you as well. But it's really a good story. The audio was great. It kept my attention, and I would definitely recommend this one for people who think that they would like a mixed media mystery. Next, I mentioned this on a short video that I did. This is Hemlock and Sulphur by T. Kingfisher. And she is a fairly prolific author that I had never read before. And this is a fairy tale retelling, which I do enjoy. And so I decided to give it a try. And I did enjoy it. So the main character is named Anya. This is a Snow White type of story. So there is a princess who is ill, and no one knows why. And they hire Anya, who is an expert in poisons, to come to the remote place where the princess is being kept and to try to figure out how could she be poisoned when she's very isolated and she can't go anywhere, and they monitor anything that comes in. Now, there are elements of Snow White in this. There is the poisoning, there's an unusual apple, there are mirrors, there is a stepmother, and so there are those elements in there, but it is a totally different take on Snow White. It goes in many different directions. Kingfisher does write some horror. There is one element of this that gets a little creepier than my usual reading, because I do not read horror, but for the most part, it is fantasy, and it's a fantasy and mystery wrapped up in one, which really worked for me. So I'd recommend it, and this one has a really fun apple green sprayed edge as well. So if you collect hardcovers, this would be a fun one to collect. This next one is called The Living and the Dead by Christopher Carlson. Now, he is a Swedish author, and this title is newly published in the US, so I decided to give it a try. I have to say that it was not altogether my cup of tea. The beginning part, I was really invested. It had very short chapters. It went quickly. I thought for such a larger book that it was going to fly by. And then it kind of got bogged down in the middle for me. Partway through, it does shift times. So it jumps forward by maybe 20 years. And so there is a crime that happens in the first part of the book when the main character, Sander, is 18, and there are things that happen within his friend group that turn into some crime situations. So this is a murder mystery, and the second half of the book, he returns to his hometown and he discovers that the things they thought happened before, the explanations that they thought they had might not be the correct ones. And so there's a new look at the case from that time in the future. And it's very character focused. It really delves into each individual, and I do like that in my mysteries. I like the combination of character and plot, but the plot just didn't move along enough for me, quickly enough for me. So I wouldn't hesitate for other people to give this a try. If you like Nordic mysteries, you might just really enjoy it. Next, I read the sequel that people have been waiting for, the sequel to The Last Thing He Told Me. I have to check the title because it's this series of words that I could easily put in the wrong order and come up with the wrong title. This sequel is The First Time I Saw Him, and it's by Laura Dave. She had great success with the first book in this series and didn't expect it to be a series until she wrote a sequel. It had an Apple TV show, and the second series of the Apple TV show is currently out. I watched the first one, but I did not watch this one. I have the feeling I might like the show better than the book. For me, this felt like it was written because a sequel was desired, not because there was a great story to tell. And so it kind of got repetitive and bogged down. In this tale, the main character and her stepdaughter are older, 5 years older than they were in the first book, and they're on good terms and they have accepted life as it is. I won't say more than that. If you haven't read the first one, you would need to read that one first for sure, because this one does follow up on that one. But I felt like it kind of ran out of steam. There was a twist, but it didn't kind of grab me. So I gave this one kind of a mixed review, but people who really enjoyed the first book will probably be interested to see the characters come back and have another adventure. Okay, the next book is called Whidbey by T. Kira Madden. And this title has also been very promoted ahead of publication, so I had it on my hold list pretty early on, and it's a very dark book. In this book, there is a serial criminal, and the story focuses on the points of view of 3 of his victims, and it involves child molestation. It's a really tough topic to listen to. Some of the descriptions were more graphic than I really could stomach, and I would skip past them. And so it was excellent writing, really, really well written story. But you do have to be able to handle that grit. And I do read a lot of darker mystery stories. It was a little too gritty just for me. I continued to read it and finished it because of the story, and I do say it was an excellent book, but it needs to be for a specific audience. It's not going to be just for your popcorn thriller readers. Next, I read a book called Life and Death and Giants by Ron Rindo. It is a story that is really formed from community. The main character starts out being born at the beginning of the book and then grows up through his life, and you see his life through the eyes of other people in his community that he was important to. And the amazing thing about this person is he was huge. He was a huge baby. He was a very, very tall child, and he grew up to be, in the book, the tallest man in the world. And so this is the story of his life, what happened, how the people around him reacted to him, the troubles that he had. The people in his community really express themselves in this book. So it's not just about him, but it's about them, and it's about the connections that they end up making with each other as well through the course of knowing Gabriel. And so it was a really, really good literary story for those of you who would like to have a more literary book to read. And it didn't have a mystery in it, and it wasn't middle grade, but it's one of those books that I read because I just love all kinds of books. And next is the book that many or all of you may have heard of already, Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. We had this chosen for the library book club that I'm in, and I'd read several other books by her, but not all of them, so this was a first read for me. In this book, Joan is accepted into the astronaut program in 1980, and it follows through the years that she's in the program and how she and the class of people who were training together reach a point of crisis. So the book actually starts out with that point of crisis when Joan is in the mission control room, and something goes wrong with the team of people who are up in space. And from there, you go back and you learn about the relationships among those people. You learn how Joan knows them. You learn how they relate to each other. You see them grow during the space program. There is some science in this, but it is not a real sciencey book. It's really more about the relationships. And Joan also has a sister who has a daughter. The sister is a single mother, and Joan plays a very big role in her life. So that also plays a part in here. And Joan's personal relationships, it has an LGBTQ storyline as well. It's very much a closed door story for people who are romance readers and know what closed door story means. So I did enjoy this one. It wasn't my favorite of her books. I think it was just an entertaining read. The people in my book club all did really like it a lot. Next, I have the new Tana French book, which is called The Keeper. It's the third in the Cal Hooper series. You really do want to read these three in order. So I'm not going to say too much because I don't want to spoil the first two books. But Cal Hooper is a retired Chicago detective who has relocated to Ireland in a country house. And so he has formed relationships over the first two books with people in this town. In the first book, he is newly arrived, and now, of course, it's several years later. And so there's an incident in this town that he is pulled into in a way because everybody there knows he was a detective. And so they're trying to figure out what really happened in this incident. Now, I would say this story is really more about the community than it is about the crime. It's about the people, the relationships they had with each other, how they are going to handle what's happening without it disrupting those relationships that have taken a long time to build up. And so the community is really kind of the love story of this book, even more than it is a police procedure or a mystery. In fact, partway through, we kind of figure out who may have done it. So it is a different take on a mystery. If you're looking for a story with lots and lots of characterization, because that's what Tana French does super well, you will enjoy this one. But it is a hefty read, and like I said, you would want to read the first and second ones before you tackle this one. Next, I had a little bit of a backlist title, The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. Now, this is a book I picked up because it is a combination fantasy and mystery. This book is described as a Sherlock Holmes and Watson type of story, and our main character in this is the Watson character. So there is a person that he works with who's kind of more reclusive, and she has this very discerning way of figuring things out. without actually being at the scenes of the crime, because Din, who is the detective in this, is the one who actually goes to the crime scenes and then reports back to her what he has seen and what he has heard. He has a special gift where he can repeat back anything that he has seen and heard. And so it takes place in a completely fantastic land. There is some political intrigue. That is not my personal favorite. And there is a sequel to this book and maybe a third. I am not sure I'm going to continue. I really like the character of Din and the story is unfolded, but it was a little hard for me to keep track of the characters. I was listening to it on audio, and the political intrigue, as I said, is just not my favorite part of fantasy books. And so I was glad I read this one, and I would recommend it for people who are looking for that combination of fantasy and mystery put together. Next, I have a book, a backlist title by John Scalzi. This is called Lock In. It's another mystery. In this one, it's taking place sometime in the future after a kind of pandemic has happened, and there are people who were affected by the pandemic in such a way that they can't use their bodies anymore, but their minds are still fully intact. So these people are locked in. In this story, the main character is a newly appointed FBI agent who's working for an arm of the agency that deals with crimes that are related to people who are locked in. And so it's fascinating. There is a whole description of what happens. I don't want to say more than that because part of the fun of this book is seeing it unfold as you read it. But if that sounds like it would be of interest to you, we kind of follow along. It's a first-person story. We follow along with this main character on his first case, and it does end up intersecting with his personal life as well. So we get a glimpse into his background and his family life as we go along. So there is another book in this series as well, and I will probably pick that one up at some point. And I like this one so much, I did pass it on to my husband because I thought he would enjoy it, and I think he's about halfway through it right now. The next book that I read is a new series by Dana Stabenow. It's called The Harvey Girl, and this is based on a historical situation where the railroads were new, and people on the railroads needed a place to eat when they would get off at the station. And so this man, whose last name was Harvey, set up these restaurants, and the young women who worked there were called Harvey Girls. So that's where the title comes from. And in this case, the main character is a private eye, and she is hired to go pose as a Harvey girl while she is investigating some robberies that happened on the trains. And so there is an intersection with what's happening on the trains and what's happening at the restaurant. There's another agent, FBI agent, who's in town. Now this is all happening back in, I don't have the book in front of me, so I'm gonna say the 1880s. And so it was really unusual for a woman to be one of these detectives working for the Pinkerton agency. And they do go into, as you go along, her story unravels. You see how she got to be a member of the Pinkerton agency. So her story is unraveling at the same time as the case is unraveling for her. So I did enjoy this. It's the first book in a new series. I'm not sure when the next one will come out, but I will plan to give that one a try. The next one is called The Book Witch by Meg Schaefer. She has written several book-related stories. This one I was eager to pick up because in this case, the main character is a book witch, which means she has an ability to jump in to stories and solve things that are happening that have gone wrong in the stories. And there are other people who are able to move into stories and make things go wrong. So this books will have things go wrong with them. A chapter will go missing. A character will suddenly disappear who's supposed to be in there. The book witches have a whole set of rules. They're not allowed to interact with the characters in the books. I'm not really going to say more than that, because if that appeals to you, you will know if this is the book for you. Now, I felt like there was kind of a section in the middle where there was a twist, and it spent quite a bit of time on that element of the story, and that was not my favorite part. I could have done without that particular twist personally, but it does add some dimension to the story, and so I can appreciate it for that reason. And the book was just plain fun. If you're a person who likes the Tuesday Next series, where there's also a character who can go into books and solve problems. The Tuesday Next series is I've only read the first one, but they're a little snarkier. And this one it has some romance. It's a little more tender-hearted than those others. So that's The Book Witch by Meg Schaefer, and I would recommend that for people who like to read books about books. Next, I read a thriller called It's Not Her by Mary Kubica. And this book started out fast and it really jumped into the action. The main character is named Courtney. She is vacationing for a week at a compound. She's in one cabin with her husband and daughter, and in a cabin next door is her brother, her brother's wife, and their 3 children, 2 of whom are teenagers. And so one day early in the morning, the 2 youngest children, her daughter and her niece, come and wake her up, and they have blood on them because they had spent the night at her cabin, and they had gone back over to the other cabin, and they found the parents dead and one of the teenagers missing. And so the story goes from there. Courtney is determined to figure out what has happened. And so I was into it at the beginning. I kind of lost some interest as he went along because I just felt that it lacked some realism, it lacked some depth, and I wanted more. I wanted more from the relationships of the characters, and it really wasn't like that. That's often not what thrillers are like, and so that's why I prefer mysteries over thrillers. But I did give this one a try, and if that premise sounds like it's intriguing to you, you might want to try it as well. The last book that I have that was for adults is The Orchard by Peter Heller. This is a paperback publication, and it has this beautiful sunrise or sunset cover. And this is a lovely story. If you've read Peter Heller before, you know he likes to write about nature, and mysteries might take place in a forest. In this case, the story takes place in an orchard, and it's not a mystery. This is a mother-daughter story. And the main character is the daughter. So in the story, she is 7, maybe 6 or 7. And then part of the story is told from her point of view as she's an adult. She's expecting a child of her own, and so she's reminiscing and looking back at her relationship with her mother when she was a child. And it was gloriously written. I finished this, I read it on audio, and when I finished it, I had to just do that pause for a moment and reflect and let it sink in. At this point, this is my top book of the year. Now, it's like I said, it's not a mystery, even though he can be a mystery author. It is very much a character-driven book, but there are enough things that happen in it that kept me engaged. It wasn't boring to me, and the characters were just so gorgeously delineated in this story that they were full-blown people, and you grew to really care about what was happening in this tale. So I would recommend this to anyone who's willing to take a try at a character story that's more character than plot. That's The Orchard by Peter Heller. And that's the end of my recount of my April reads of adult titles. I have about 10 more titles that were middle grade books, and because this video is already so long, I will make a second video featuring those titles, and that will be posted soon. In the meantime, I want to thank you for visiting Mystery in Middle Grade, and I hope to see you back soon. You can find written reviews of these titles and others at my Substack, which is also titled Mystery and Middle Grade. So I hope to see you again the next time.